in 2015, Sir Simon Rattle was appointed as the new music director as the London Symphony Orchestra, and we wanted to take that opportunity to rebrand and reposition the orchestra as an orchestra for the 21st century, and to ensure that the dynamic music making that we put on stage was reflected in all of the designs and the visual representation of who the orchestra is.
So before we obviously got into the creative work itself, we went through a research and audit and interview stage, really, I guess, with the remit of looking at how LSO's brand was communicating at the time, and indeed many of its competitors were also communicating. And this is quite an interesting process on a number of levels, but I guess specifically, one of the insights we got from this was that at the time, most of particularly the London orchestras, were using quite a traditional representation of classical music experience, largely being photographs of either musicians, conductors, all within music hall sort of context. And so I guess that gave them a number of issues. One, it was very hard to distinguish one orchestra from another. And the other, again, we established this through a number of different kind of interviews and research, is that with regards to new audiences and younger audiences specifically, that representation of the music was actually a barrier to them in terms of reinforce some of their negative associations of classical music, in that some people thought it was traditional and boring. So subsequently, we then set out to create a visual identity that puts Sir Simon Rattle at the heart of the brand, and do so in a way that was going to be progressive and innovative, but also do it in a way that would capture the emotional and visceral power of their music. From the very outset, LSO had a very, very clear ambition for the brand. And the essence of which is that they wanted to be the world's most inspired symphony orchestra. That was an ambition that we totally got and believed in. And I guess as well that collectively, we had agreed early on that we would need to be ambitious and progressive with the new visual identity to ensure that we helped LSO achieve that aim. LSO were really up for trusting in the creative process and going through that creative process. And as I mentioned earlier, that's definitely a journey, and particularly when you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, and actually you're really focusing on establishing and getting the right idea. We had a really strong idea that ultimately we were going to create a visual identity that saw Sir Simon Rattle actually almost conduct this visual identity. But when we were going through the early concept stages of that, we didn't quite know what that was going to look like. So there's a huge leap of faith that LSO need to take to see that journey through to its ultimate conclusion. And they were superb at going on that journey and trusting in that process.
The LSO is very dynamic and forward-thinking organisation, and that allowed us to really meet with the dynamic ideas and the forward-thinking ideas that Superunion were able to present to us, and the different options that they were able to present to us, and that we were prepared to trust in those and run with those. go with try and progress several ideas at once to see where they took us, and ultimately end up with a really sort of inspiring and forward-thinking result. I think that idea of being challenged is really key and is really healthy to a creative relationship. And the initial process that we went through was really in depth, and it was very enlightening for the LSO as an organisation, and made us really question many aspects of what it means to be sort of a 21st century orchestra, and what it means to be presenting this to our work to our audiences, and being challenged on some of those points, and being happy to accept the challenge and have a debate about those points. It brought about some very healthy conversations and some excellent results at the end of the day.
What was really interesting is that the briefing we got from LSO was one of the most in-depth, intense briefing sessions I think I've ever had. I think that was really important in terms of us really immersing and getting our heads into the orchestra and what it's all about and its history. So I think that was a very valuable part of the process. There was just that investment, I guess, in really understanding and getting our heads into the space of the orchestra and what it's all about.
I think that investment obviously really paid off, because it means that each time we've come to look at a new season of concerts, and have gone back to Superunion with a brief about what the new season is musically, and then have ideas about how that might look visually, that there's a base understanding that they've got the LSO, and they can then riff on that, so that we can bring something new each time, but with a real grounding in what the LSO is and how it should appear.
The actual LSO mark that you see at the heart of this brand dates back to 2004, when we rebranded the orchestra at that stage, as it was approaching its centenary. And I think what's really nice about working with LSO, I guess, at that stage, was that obviously that was a very important moment by the nature of it being their centenary. And again, looking forward now to where we are 15 years later, I guess, when we got that original briefing, there was another great opportunity to help the orchestra evolve the visual identity and its brand. Work with ambitious clients, clients who not only, I guess, are ambitious, but also are willing to trust in the creative process and go on that journey. I think great collaboration comes from working really closely with your clients, and that's not just the leads of the project, that's everybody involved in the project needs to have and should be in the room in all of those important meetings. In fact, as many of those meetings as possible that you are having, the whole team should be involved in that process, so that you just really get that full insight across the team.
So one of my tips is to be brave. Be brave with the brief to the agency, and be brave with listening to what they present back to you. But ensure that there's a robust structure in place to the way that you work together, not just creatively, but practically as well, so that there's a structure and there's some boundaries to working together. That although you might be going off in different directions in the creative process, that it's always within some boundaries.
From our side, from Superunion, not only obviously are we very focused around creatively pushing and driving the work, but I work very closely with client service lead, Suze, who did an amazing job at structuring our process, supporting the creative ambitions, but doing so in a way that I think was obviously quite reassuring and gave a lot of trust and confidence in that process to LSO. I guess my final tip would be, I talked at the beginning about working with ambitious clients, which is definitely the case, but you also want to work with nice people and work with great clients. And we've definitely been super lucky with LSO in terms of not only having an ambitious client, but also working with a great group of lovely people. And that has made the process so rewarding, not only in terms of when we first created the relaunch in 2017, but every year subsequently. And it is a rewarding and joyous process.